Some nations disappear from political maps, erased by war, annexation, or shifting borders. But there's another kind of disappearance, quieter, more insidious. Economic collapse. These are countries that once held sway with strong currencies, thriving industries, and global influence, and now barely register in the world's financial systems. Nations that have fallen into bankruptcy, irrelevance, or total dependence on foreign powers. This documentary isn't about lost territories, it's about lost futures. About how economic might can dissolve, leaving behind empty factories, worthless bills, and generations trapped in cycles of debt and despair. We'll explore stories that go beyond GDP charts, tales of corruption, sanctions, misguided reforms, internal conflict, and global shifts that rewrote destinies. What happens when a country stops producing, innovating, or competing? What warning signs precede the fall? And what do these collapses reveal about the fragility of the global order? Join us on a journey through the economic ruins of the modern world. Because understanding how an economy dies might just help us understand how one survives.
The first sign that a country is vanishing from the global economic map isn't always war, sanctions, or political collapse. Sometimes, it's something deceptively simple: the disappearance of trust in its currency. When money loses meaning, a nation begins to fade, not just from spreadsheets and trade routes, but from the future itself. Take Zimbabwe, for example. In the midst of hyperinflation, the government printed a $100 trillion banknote. A surreal figure, almost comical, until you realize it couldn't even buy a loaf of bread. The currency became a symbol of collapse, not value. People carried stacks of bills that weighed more than the goods they could afford. Eventually, the Zimbabwean dollar was abandoned, replaced by foreign currencies and barter systems. Venezuela followed a similar path, though slower and more agonizing. The bolivar, once a stable currency, lost nearly all its value. Inflation soared, wages evaporated, and daily life became a calculation of survival. Today, many Venezuelans rely on US dollars, Colombian pesos, or even cryptocurrencies to navigate a broken economy. The bolivar still exists, but only in theory. In practice, it's a ghost. And then there's Weimar Germany, in the 1920s. After World War I, the country faced crushing reparations and a devastated economy. Inflation spiraled so wildly that families burned banknotes for heat. They were cheaper than firewood. Savings vanished overnight. The currency, once a tool of exchange, became a cruel joke. The collapse paved the way for political extremism and historical consequences that reshaped the world. When a currency dies, it's more event. It's a psychological rupture. Prices lose meaning, contracts dissolve, the future becomes unplannable, and the country, no matter how rich in resources or talent, loses its seat at the global table. A nation without a trusted currency is like a body without blood. It may still move, but it cannot thrive. And in that slow, invisible hemorrhage, it begins to disappear. The Soviet Union once stood as a titan, a superpower forged in ideology, steel, and ambition. But in 1991, it unraveled. Not just politically, economically, existentially. The fall of the socialist bloc sent shockwaves across Eurasia. Central planning, the system that had orchestrated production, labor, and trade for decades, vanished almost overnight. And with it, the scaffolding of daily life collapsed. Russia, the empire's core, plunged into a deep recession. Inflation spiraled out of control. The ruble lost its meaning. Factories went silent. And the state, once omnipresent, became a ghost. Ukraine saw its GDP shrink by more than half. Belarus entered economic paralysis. Across the region, poverty surged. Savings evaporated. Pensions became symbolic. And millions faced a future they no longer recognized. The transition to capitalism wasn't gradual. It was violent. A chaotic wave of privatizations, often riddled with corruption. State assets were sold for pennies. Oligarchs rose, and the social contract dissolved. Scientists, teachers, engineers, all had to relearn the rules. The market replaced the plan. Efficiency replaced solidarity, and survival replaced ideology. One brutal lesson emerged. Even an economic empire, rich in resources and armed with power, can collapse in just a few years. Not from scarcity, but from stagnation, from a refusal to adapt. The fall of planned economies was not just the end of a system. It was the birth of a new uncertainty. one that still echoes in the streets of Moscow, Kyiv, and Minsk. A reminder that no model is eternal, and no power immune to time. Some nations were rich, overflowing with oil, culture, or strategic power. But wealth, without wisdom, is fragile. Iraq, Libya, and Greece each held promise. What followed was collapse, not from scarcity, but from mismanagement, corruption, and conflict. Iraq once stood as a titan of oil production, its reserves among the largest in the world. But after the 2003 invasion, the country unraveled. Billions in oil revenue vanished into opaque contracts and corrupt networks. Infrastructure crumbled. Sectarian violence surged. The promise of prosperity was buried beneath rubble and bureaucracy. Today, despite its vast resources, Iraq struggles to provide electricity, clean water, and jobs. Its oil wealth became a curse, exploited, misused, and weaponized. Under Gaddafi, Libya boasted one of Africa's highest per capita incomes. But when his regime fell in 2011, the nation fractured. Rival factions fought over oil fields. Institutions collapsed. The central bank lost control. Inflation soared. The currency plummeted. Libya became a battlefield of interests, foreign and domestic, where oil was no longer a tool for development, but a prize for power. The silence of governance was replaced by the noise of militias. Greece's fall was quieter, but no less dramatic. In 2010, its debt crisis shook Europe. Years of overspending, tax evasion, and financial opacity caught up. The country was forced into austerity. Pensions were slashed. Unemployment soared. Families lost homes. Greece didn't vanish from the map, but its economic sovereignty did. The birthplace of democracy became a cautionary tale of fiscal recklessness in the modern age. These stories share a haunting truth. Wealth is not immunity. When leadership fails, when institutions rot, even the richest nations can fall. Oil, money, legacy. None are shields against collapse. They are mirrors, reflecting the choices made in silence, behind closed doors. Some nations don't vanish from the map, but they fade from the center of global influence. They retain flags, borders, and anthems, yet lose control over their economic destiny. Their sovereignty becomes symbolic, their independence, conditional. This is the story of countries that, by choice or circumstance, surrendered key levers of economic power. Panama and El Salvador. Dollarized but disempowered Panama adopted the US dollar in 1904, shortly after its separation from Colombia and during the construction of the Panama Canal, a project deeply tied to American interests. El Salvador followed nearly a century later, in 2001, hoping to stabilize its post-war economy and attract foreign investment. Dollarization brought predictability, lower inflation, and easier trade, but it also came at a cost: the loss of monetary sovereignty. These nations cannot print their own currency, adjust interest rates, or devalue to respond to crises. Their economies are tethered to decisions made in Washington, not in San Salvador or Panama City. As one study notes, while Panama has thrived in some sectors, El Salvador has struggled to match regional growth. Stability, yes, but at the price of autonomy. Haiti. Surviving on remittances and aid. Haiti's economy is not built on exports or innovation. It survives on remittances and foreign aid. Over 20% of its GDP comes from money sent by Haitians abroad. International donors fund hospitals, schools, and infrastructure. But this lifeline has become a trap. The constant flow of external support has weakened domestic institutions, fostered dependency, and eroded accountability. Corruption festers, public services falter, and when aid slows, the country teeters. Haiti exists, but its economic pulse is sustained by others. It's a nation in permanent emergency mode, where resilience is heroic but unsustainable. Puerto Rico. A territory in economic limbo. Puerto Rico is neither a sovereign nation nor a full-fledged U.S. state. It receives federal subsidies, uses the U.S. dollar, and follows American law. Yet it lacks voting representation in Congress and cannot shape the policies that govern its economy. In 2015, Puerto Rico declared its debt, over $70 billion, unpayable. A federal oversight board was imposed, stripping the island of budgetary control. Today, Puerto Rico's economy is shaped by external decisions, its development constrained by legal ambiguities and fiscal austerity. It's a place of vibrant culture and deep pride, yet economically, it floats in a gray zone, dependent, indebted, and politically muted. These cases reveal a quieter form of collapse, not through war or disaster, but through erosion. When a country loses control of its currency, its budget, or its ability to plan for the future, it becomes economically peripheral. Dollarization, debt, and aid can offer short-term relief, but they often mask long-term fragility. These nations still exist, but in the global economy, their presence is minimal, their sovereignty diluted, their future shaped elsewhere. Nations don't vanish in a single moment. Sometimes, all it takes is a currency collapse, the fall of an industry, or the erosion of international trust. Economic disappearance can be quiet. No explosions, no headlines, just a slow fading from relevance. Some countries recover. They rebuild institutions, renegotiate debts, reinvent their economies. Others remain trapped in cycles of dependence, austerity, or stagnation. But all of them, whether rising or falling, teach us the same lesson. In the global economy, no nation is untouchable. History is filled with examples. Argentina, Greece, Sri Lanka, Lebanon, each has danced between prosperity and crisis. Economic power is not a permanent shield. It's a fragile privilege, earned and lost through decisions, leadership, and luck. In today's interconnected world, sovereignty is more complex than ever. A policy shift in Washington can ripple through Panama. A debt default in Africa can shake European banks. The map of economic influence is fluid, expanding, contracting, reshaping itself with every crisis and recovery. The power a country holds today may become its downfall tomorrow, and the forgotten nation of yesterday may rise as a symbol of resilience. The economic map doesn't stand still. It breathes, it pulses, and in that rhythm, we are reminded, nothing is permanent. Not wealth, not collapse, only change.